it's great that, young and that you're in your mid-30s and you're having that realization and setting those standards and boundaries for yourself. But for some women, it takes them a lot longer to learn that or to give themselves permission to love themselves and be important to themselves and, feed that energy back to themselves, figure out what their interests are.
Welcome to Follow Your Heartsong, where we reclaim pleasure, break taboos, and awaken to our deepest desires. I'm Rose Heartsong, bringing you raw, unapologetic conversations on sex, spirit, and self-liberation. Let's dive in.
Hello, Laguna Beach. This is Rose Heartsong, and you're listening to Follow Your Heartsong every single Sunday night at 9 p.m. Pacific Standard Time to 10 p.m. And this is the show where we talk about the taboo, sexuality, spirituality, holistic health. And I like to challenge you to question what you have been told is taboo or the things we just don't really talk about in our society. I have a guest on tonight that I met recently in Laguna Beach, and she is a friend of a friend that has become a new friend for me. And she brought some of her friends down from LA, and we started to talk about just what we do and what the offer is for the world. And one of the things I've noticed in working with a lot of the clients I work with is I'm in my mid-30s and I haven't had to get into the conversation yet about perimenopause, hormonal shifts, and so forth. And so this is something that I actually have no knowledge on, completely in the dark. And so the guest tonight, we were talking about that. Her name is Dara Sloan, and she is a holistic health, life, and mindset coach that's certified in NLP. She's an NLP practitioner who focuses on helping women in their 40s and 50s reinvent themselves. And she was talking about how her experience with sex and libido and all of that didn't shift in perimenopause. So I was really excited to have her on the show. So welcome, Dara. I'd love to have you introduce yourself and share a little bit more about your story and how you got here.
Thank you, Rose. I'm happy to be here and share whatever I can tonight. I will say that I think you're very wise in trying to get some information about this topic. Being in your mid-30s, the more, education and knowledge you can get about this time of your life, perimenopause, menopause, the better. So I'm Dara Sloan. I am a holistic health, life, and mindset coach. I focus on helping women reinvent themselves, turning their blow-ups into glow-ups. And I'm here tonight as a woman who went through perimenopause. I got support from a naturopath and chose bioidentical hormones and combined that with a whole person approach to keep my energy, mood, and sex drive alive.
It's amazing. I love that. I really love that I'm having this conversation now because one of the things I've had that unique honor of is getting kind of inside the, not I don't do anything intimately with my clients, but I get the intimate behind the scenes of how hormones impact intimate relationships, right? And a lot of times perimenopause or menopause really creates a friction and disruption in relationships and sex lives. And just like the period and our menstrual cycle, there's not a lot of knowledge out in the world about how to navigate it with grace and ease. And I'm so grateful because, now we're starting to have these apps that track our hormones and how to eat for our cycle. And, we have the 4 different phases and these conversations are very alive right now. And we're not very alive when it comes to perimenopause, at least not in my reality. Maybe because I am in my mid-30s, I don't see it. And maybe, social media just definitely markets to people that are in that age range. And we're kind of in a biased society right now with the way the algorithms work. And I love, because we were talking before we got on the show, I think the important thing is to be preventative. And that's what I love about what the work you're doing and what you're offering is making sure not to have a midlife crisis, right? To prevent that and have a glow up instead of a midlife crisis because it's normal.
And quote, your midlife doesn't have to be a crisis, right? Crisis happens when you're already feeling all the symptoms of perimenopause and menopause, and you're already in crisis. So now you have to address that. And not that you can't reverse it, you can, the symptoms. But I think it's really smart to get ahead of it. And, you know, in terms of talking about it, I think it's really important to talk about it more. And I mean, I know my mom really didn't even talk to me that much about it or what I should expect. So I kind of reached out to other women that are older than me to get some direction and understanding, and did some research on my own to understand what happens during this time.
So what age range is it currently in 2025? Like, do you think it's common for women to start having symptoms under, like, based on the hormones that are going? Because I know that changes, like, I think it's like more common for girls to get their period at 9 now because of all the
That's
hormones.
early. Yeah.
Which is, it's just because there's so many hormones in our reality.
I mean, I would say that it's probably pretty common for women in their 40s to start experiencing perimenopause symptoms, but certainly it can happen in your mid-30s too. I think it's not as common, but I've definitely heard stories of it happening.
Okay.
And just so you know, the symptoms that we're talking about, you know, you might have your periods become irregular. If you were having normal periods before, you'll definitely notice that there's a change. Even if they were irregular, you might start to see some differences there. Sleep patterns, mood changes, sometimes hair loss is a symptom.
What about when you say irregular periods? Is it longer times in between periods, or?
Yeah. So for me, my periods were always normal, regular, on time, the same amount of time every month. I didn't have any symptoms. I was really lucky that way. So I saw the change very quickly. There was a 3-month gap between periods. So that's not normal for me. And then that 3-month gap became consistent. And that's when I knew, okay, I'm hitting that stage. I'm in perimenopause. And I reached out to a naturopath and started the conversation. And she, you know, told me that you can get ahead of this now. So let's get a hormone panel done, take a look at where you are, and then make some adjustments, because you don't have to have the symptoms that come with perimenopause or menopause if you get ahead of it. And that's what I did.
So those symptoms are hair loss, hormone imbalances, sleep problems,
Mood changes,
low libido,
fatigue, brain fog, low libido, vaginal dryness. And those things honestly scared me. I was like, I don't want that. Is there any way to, make sure that doesn't happen to me? And so because I started as the second that I realized, and for me, I will say it was a little bit easier because my periods were so regular. And I think some of the changes can be a little bit harder for women who are on birth control, who are already taking some hormones. And so the shifts can be probably a little harder to see. But I mean, I am not, by the way, I just want to have a caveat and disclosure here. I am not a hormone expert by any means. I'm just here sharing my experience and things that I've seen as a coach.
Yeah. And just for that, whenever we share a lot of health stuff on here, I also am not a doctor. Go to your medical practitioner to get your hormones done. And I highly recommend working with an alternative medical doctor, because one of the things I've noticed is when you go to a traditional medical doctor, they have a tendency to just put you on birth control. But when you go to like a functional medicine doctor or a Chinese medicine doctor or an alternative, there are like a lot of peptides and like there's a lot of like cutting edge holistic medicine that's coming out right now, which is really exciting and I love. And I highly recommend getting like an advanced panel, because in the Western medicine world, in my own personal experience, in working in a functional medicine clinic and running hundreds of blood labs through systems, I didn't do it. I'm not a phlebotomist, but I ordered hundreds and hundreds of blood labs. The blood labs that Western medicine get is, they have a tendency to be very kind of black or white, right? You're either sick or you're healthy. there's kind of not that in-between gray area. When I think about perimenopause, even though I have no experience of it, I'm imagining that a lot of it is kind of in that gray area. And what you're talking about here is like a lot of that preventative care, right, is getting ahead of it. And we don't live in a world in which that's the norm. We live in a world in which you go to the doctor when you're sick.
You wait till you're in crisis, and then you deal with the crisis. And so what I coach women on is that your midlife doesn't have to be a crisis. It's, it's a new kind of an initiation into a new chapter into your life. And you can get ahead of symptoms. And, I think the other thing that I would say is not just to go reach out to an integrative or a functional medical practitioner who specializes in female hormones, but really they'll probably suggest bioidentical hormones. And what I mean by that is hormones that match what your body naturally makes. And so that's what I did. I did bioidentical because there are less side effects and it, matches my body. It's based on my testing.
And so what kind of bioidentical hormones did you get on?
Well, for me, I did the estradiol patch. I have a progesterone, and I do have a little bit of a testosterone compounded cream.
And these are mainly patches and creams, right? So
correct.
That's cool. And
except for the progesterone, that is a pill.
It's a pill. Okay.
Yeah.
And when you put the creams on, do you put it on your womb or your uterus? Or
the one I have is to be put on your inner thigh.
Oh, interesting.
So
that's where they tell you to put it.
Yeah. And they took the levels, so I'm on the lowest levels, and that's ideal. You don't really want to be on super high levels if you don't need to be. So that's why it's really important to get testing. But even, when I went to my primary doctor, she said that Western medical OBGYNs and primary physicians don't necessarily do the full female hormone panel, that you do have to go to a naturopath or an integrative doctor who specializes in this, that it's really not something that's covered by your regular insurance.
And it's not common.
Right.
Which is really sad.
Yeah.
And it's sad, and it makes logical sense, because I don't know if you're paying attention right now, but for everybody who's listening, we are just now in 2025, the end of 2025, starting to do testing on women's bodies based on women's bodies and women's health. We haven't been putting money and resources, like a lot of the research done on heart attacks and cancer have been done on men's bodies, and they've been using that same medicine and research and applying it to women's bodies, and our bodies are so different. And we finally have money and people fighting in healthcare to do testing on our bodies and understand. We just found out was it a year ago, not very long ago, that we have stem cells in our menstrual blood, and we didn't even take an MRI of a clitoris until 2009.
Wow.
That's why the clitoris, the little 3D clitoris came out, and it was really big all of a sudden, because we had no idea what the clitoris looked like until 2009. Nobody did that. And so I'm feisty right now, and I'm passionate about women having knowledge of their own bodies and being proactive and fighting for their care and really asking for help for their bodies, like what you're talking about, before it becomes a problem. It's so, so incredibly important in all areas of life, in all areas of the body, right? I worked for a chiropractor for 2 years, and most people don't go to a chiropractor until they're in pain, but that's because you're out of alignment, right? So usually when there's activated pain and suffering in the body, that's you're in crisis. And so the glow up, what is the glow up? What is the glow? How do you go about that? What kind of journey do you bring women on? What are you excited to share?
So it's interesting, at this stage of life, hormones is just one piece of a bigger ecosystem. So you have food, sleep, your nervous system, emotional safety, the quality of your relationships. So at some point, one of these pillars, and it could be within your career or your purpose, they start to fall apart or blow up. And that's not by accident. So what I do is work with women on those areas and upgrading, because they're being called to create something new in that area of their life. And it's kind of going along with this other season, their body's physically changing too. And they're kind of being called to rebirth or reinvent themselves.
Yeah. I mean, like, do you feel, can I ask, are you complete with perimenopause or are you still in perimenopause?
I am not. I am out of perimenopause.
So you're in.
So I just hit the one year mark.
So you're in menopause.
So this is something else that I learned too that nobody told me and I researched on my own, was that you can be in perimenopause for anywhere from like a year to 10 years. Like, it just depends. It's different for every woman. Everybody's body is different. And unfortunately, that's the worst part of it. That's when the symptoms are the loudest. Then when you hit, and then it's not that you don't have the symptoms when you're in menopause or post-menopause. It's just that they're not quite as loud. Ideally, you want to balance your hormones so that you're not having any symptoms. So even if you are having you went through perimenopause, you didn't balance your hormones and you kind of just white knuckled it. You get to menopause and you're just kind of tired of feeling that way. And you can, whether you want to do bioidentical HRTs or you want to go to Chinese herbalists that create something for you to balance your hormones, you can still, take care of those symptoms at that point. But menopause is the 1 year where you actually don't have a period. So when you complete that full year with no period, that was menopause. But you don't know that you were in menopause until you complete that year. So if you have your period during that year, the clock starts over and you have to wait again and another, year until you don't have any period. Then once you complete that 1 year mark, you're technically automatically in post-menopause.
Interesting.
So I thought that was interesting. You don't even know that you're in menopause until it's over.
That is interesting. So I'm making up a story in my head right now because I have a really healthy relationship with my menstrual cycle. I love my menstrual cycle. I love tracking it. I love working with it. I work for myself. So a lot of times I'll design my schedule around it. I'll design what I do, events, trips, all sorts of things. And I have a deep devotional practice with it. And the idea of not having that in life kind of sounds sad.
Yeah. So some women like yourself will track it. So just, with energy or with food, depending on where you are, there are 4 stages of the cycle. So whether you're in the ovulation stage or luteal phase, it just, what you eat or how you work out or what your energies are. And if you're conscious about that, then you're adjusting your patterns every month to that. What happens when you get into perimenopause is you're losing those hormones. And so they're depleting and the cycle is changing. So all of that, all of a sudden it becomes almost like chaotic. When you come out of that or you start stabilizing your hormones, you're basically, actually, this is really more for post-menopause or post-menopause, I would say, because you don't know you're in menopause until it's over. You don't have a cycle anymore to track. And so what do you do? How do you, if you've been doing it that way? And I would say you could, a lot of women's cycles go along with the moon cycle. And so you can look at the moon cycle as something that you can still continue with. Full moon going into the waning moon is more about the releasing, let it go, decluttering your life. You can use those energies versus like the new moon into the waxing cycle, which is bringing energy into your life. And that's when you make important decisions and you sign contracts or you get in a relationship or whatever it is, So you can still follow that. It's just going to look a little different. But in terms of food, I think it's really important when you get to this stage to really stabilize your nutrition. Prioritize your protein, obviously, because bone density becomes very important. So protein becomes very important. But when you're having your periods, your food and, what your nutrition is going to kind of change in the month, depending on where you are in your cycle. And since that's gone in your post-menopause stage, you're looking at stability at that point.
Yeah. Having like a stable, consistent diet throughout the day. But so my question though is do you feel sad that you don't have it anymore?
No,
You
I'm
don't?
like happy. I'm totally, and I think a lot of this comes down to the fact that I was very preventative in terms of reaching out to a naturopath, getting on bioidentical HRTs, and preventing the symptoms. So to me, it's been a very pleasant experience. I didn't suffer from vaginal dryness or a low libido, or none of that changed for me.
And so now that you're in post-menopause, are you still on the hormones?
Yes, because your hormones have been depleted, so you still want to you still want them.
So you want to
want to keep
taking them.
taking it.
Okay.
But I do have friends that have switched over to Chinese herbs, and that is something that I'm looking into and would like to consider and kind of move away from the HRTs and go into, because I'm always going to favor something more natural. And so when this was presented to me, I thought it was pretty interesting. And so it's something I need to look into.
I wonder if there's any peptides that would help with that. Do you know?
I don't know. I don't know that much about peptides.
Yeah, I need to get a peptide expert. They're like the hot new thing right now.
Yeah.
So I know I've heard something recently that I was like, wow, I guess AI is writing the formulas for
Interesting.
peptides way faster than human beings could potentially do it. They're actually AI is writing formula for medicine and all these things. So we're going to have, I think, in the next couple of years, huge increases in so many different areas of everything with AI, right? AI is just speeding everything up really fast. But I'm kind of excited about that area and getting curious about that. But in all honesty, I don't really like peptides personally because you have to inject them to yourself and I hate needles. So I've done it before. Don't get me wrong. They're very helpful. I'm super grateful for them. And, I go on Instagram and maybe because I've been talking about peptides, as I said, where you live in a biased world with social media, all these people that I'm following are like posting them, injecting themselves with peptides. And I'm like,
yeah, I can't really see myself injecting myself like with a needle. That's just not something that I want to be doing.
Yeah, it's like, I'm like, this is uncomfortable. Like it's in my head because when you actually just do it, you don't really even feel it, but it's hard. And anyways, what I'm hearing you say is that the perimenopause and menopause symptoms do not have to be hard if you're preventative or if you're in them and you start working with somebody who can support you with that, with the bioidentical hormones and or holistic health through Chinese medicine and so forth. And that can help you balance everything out and you don't have to be afraid of it. You just have to be proactive.
Yeah, absolutely.
Amazing. So,
and touching upon because I think you said some of your female listeners are concerned about their libido being gone during this time. And, that's really only part of the story during this time, because the libido also really can be affected by other emotions like exhaustion, resentment, lack of emotional safety. And if you feel like your life doesn't feel like you anymore, that's all going to impact it. So it's not just hormones.
Yeah, no, 100%. I think like a lot of times I think about how stress and social media and technology, and I teach the ladies that I work with to have like a pleasure practice, like making it a practice in their life, like a meditation practice or a yoga practice or going to the gym. It's a pleasure practice to teach their nervous systems how to relax and to be in the feminine and to be in their pleasure and to adore themselves. And like the primary number one thing I do is a sacred bath ritual, just like getting off the phone, turning it off. That's the hardest one for all of us, right? We're so addicted to our technology all the time.
Yeah,
it drives myself
don't bring
crazy.
the phone into the bath, just to be scrolling in the bathtub. That's like not against the point.
Just having really beautiful candles on, and I highly always recommend bubble baths. I feel like a bath is just not the same. Getting an organic bubble bath.
Yeah, I agree.
Epsom salts and having nice music and candles and just being with your body and like gently. Just like when you're in the shower, you're shampooing your hair in the bath, like being with it and being with the pleasure of it and massaging your scalp like you do when you get your hair cut and like they massage your scalp, and just like really being present and breathing into your body and really practicing with yourself. That's the first thing I teach women is your pleasure is not your husband's responsibility. It's yours.
Yeah.
And that when you know what feels good in your body and you have trained your body not to clench, but to relax and surrender, then you can have mind-blowing orgasms with almost anyone. Like I think we've lived in a world where men's pleasure has been such the focus that we have forgotten that they don't have to always be the one providing the pleasure for us if we know how to relax and surrender in our own bodies.
Yeah. I think that's important.
Yeah. So stress is a huge factor. Massive. Like we live in such a stressful world.
Well,
So
and that impacts, it impacts your hormones.
that impacts everything.
Yeah.
Impacts your sleep, impacts your hormones, it impacts your skin, it impacts your hair, it impacts everything.
Right. And that's, it also will increase the inflammation that's already going on in your body by losing the estrogen. So your body is going under like kind of a low level of inflammation. And then if you're not changing your diet and you're not reducing your alcohol consumption, your wine or whatever it is, you're just adding fuel to that fire and making the inflammation worse. And that's where joint pain and all this other stuff comes in. So there has to be some adjustments with diet to support the body while it's going through this and to try to really reduce the inflammation and not add to it. And so I'm sure that's probably hard for some people to hear. They don't want to give up their wine, but unfortunately, at least reduce it.
And also, I think a lot of times, I'm not a drinker. I don't drink alcohol. I feel horrible when I do. I feel depressed. I feel anxious. I feel off. If you're dealing with depression and anxiety, my highest recommendation is to quit alcohol right away. And also, I think
if you're dealing with inflammation, I highly recommend you stop drinking alcohol until you get that under control,
Yeah. And also there's different qualities of alcohol too.
Right.
So if you're going to drink wine, get biodynamic organic wine. It doesn't have any added sulfates, and biodynamic is higher quality than organic. And they can't even have it's so clean that it can't even have a chemical toilet cleaner on the property. And they add different herbs. Biodynamic's really cool because they actually add the plant herbs in between the grapevines that nourishes the soil and feeds to the soil to give to the grapes so that it has more polyphenols and is better.
Wow, that's great.
And it's a lot of times it's called dry farm to wine or something like that. My favorite is Lunaria. It's from Italy. It's really awesome. And they'll do witchy stuff. So they'll harvest on the full moon or the new moon, and they'll plant on certain times. That's what biodynamic. It's actually biodynamic farming is actually farming. We've just kind of messed it up with all this GMO stuff and all that stuff.
Right.
But it's traditional farming.
Yeah.
It's using this moon, as you were talking about, to work with. So quality is really important if you're using alcohol. Tequila is also the cleanest, but just don't drink. I know you don't want to hear that, but it's really not good. When you stop and then you drink again, I'll drink an alcoholic beverage once every 4 to 6 months just to remind myself why I don't drink.
Yeah.
And I feel horrible and I don't have energy and I don't feel good. But I think alcohol is a really good tool to numb and disassociate and disconnect from feeling sadness or pain or anger.
But it only exacerbates it. It makes you feel worse.
It suppresses it.
Right.
So it holds it underneath that. It's like putting the dirt under the carpet.
Yeah.
It's going to build up eventually. So.
Yeah. But, this is hard for some women. They're just I don't want to give up my wine. I'm like, how much pain are you willing to be in before you make that change?
Yeah. Another one that I went to from alcohol is I went to weed. From wine to weed. And I was doing that for a while. But then I also realized in my own sexuality, in my own pleasure life, I kind of needed weed to have orgasms. And I was really I couldn't have good sex without weed, which was really interesting for me. And it was a huge wake-up call that I was oh, I need to get off this too and learn to have pleasure in my body without alcohol and without weed. And I think that's another one is when I talk to women, they're oh, I can have totally free orgasmic sex when I'm drunk, but when I'm high, but when I'm not, it's hard. And I think it's it's almost like alcohol can be like the shame remover somehow. It like takes the shame off for temporarily. But underneath that shame is usually some really fun erotic play that I like to work with people on. So, okay, so let's go back to where we were before I went on my little tangent. Perimenopause, eating healthy, not drinking alcohol, bringing inflammation down. Why? Let's talk about that. Let's talk about inflammation in the body and how it impacts our hormones and how it impacts our health in general. Inflammation is basically showing that disease is happening. Think about it. Or there's imbalance in the body. Basically, it shows up as a form of protection, right? When we're trying to fight something. Like it could be, if you roll your ankle, you're going to get inflammation. But if you have inflammation all over your whole body, you're going to gain weight too and feel puffy and achy and sleepy and exhausted and have joint pain and fog and all of that. And it's not a good way to live your life.
Definitely not. Again, I'm not a hormone specialist or a doctor, but from what I understand, estrogen itself does carry some inflammatory markers. And so when we lose estrogen, we are then, like I said before, going into kind of a low grade inflammation. I believe what makes it worse is what the person's diet is, and if they're not doing anything to balance their hormones. So they are, inflaming the body even more.
Yeah.
And it depends. It's not just hormones. Like, what are their stress levels? What are their moods or their emotional body? What's going on there?
So when we're talking about this, I just want to preface this. We are talking about the holistic piece. So
Right.
when you talk about holistic, it's the whole.
Right.
And
It's everything in your life. It's not just your physical body, but it's all the other pillars of your life. Your relationships, your career, your financial life, your health, it's obviously your health too. It's your spirituality. Like, what's your spiritual connections?
yeah.
Or maybe you don't have any. That's fine too.
Yeah, I mean, well, we talk a lot about spirituality and different forms of spirituality here on this show. My favorite spiritual practice is just nature. It's
Yeah,
like
and
the
it is for a
most
lot of
healing.
people. Yeah.
Yeah. And in the holistic piece, right, looking at the body as a whole, we've also been programmed in our current modern way of looking at medicine to just kind of look at one piece at a time and not see how they're all connected.
Yeah, this is interesting. And I've really had a lot of experience with this lately with my own personal health. And let me just say, there's nothing wrong with, certainly we have our challenges in this country with healthcare and medicine, but overall, Western medicine has its place and it's advanced in a lot of ways, and it's very good in a lot of ways. When it comes to some chronic stuff, this is where I really like to lean more into the integrative and the functional medicine side, or the alternative. And you're right. The way my dad was a doctor, my mom's a nurse, so I come from a Western medical family, and just chose not to go that route. So unfortunately, I felt like recently, as I'm trying to heal my own gut, and this is something that is also related to perimenopause and menopause that I'll get into in a moment, but I felt like I had to create the roadmap myself, because doctors and specialists focus on one area and they don't all talk to each other. So the ENT person isn't speaking to the doctor that specializes in the gut, yet there's some relation there, at least there has been for me, that there's a loop going from the gut into the nose and throat. And so dealing with that, and it was like, I kind of had to help create that roadmap, which is unfortunate. I think carving up the body like that isn't really great.
Well, it's not seeing the whole piece, right? And so that's what we're talking about when I really want to anchor in the holistic piece, is looking at everything in the whole and how everything impacts each other, and how important it is with your hormones in general to work on every single area of your life. They all impact each other. They all work together. The thyroid regulates a lot of the hormones in our bodies, and thyroid can have buildup from chemicals, like not just a lot of times when people have these blow ups in their lives and they're in pain it's because they have been ignoring the small signals, right? Like it's ignoring the extremely painful menstrual cramps with Midol, and it's ignoring the PCOS symptoms by taking birth control pills instead of like really working on the whole piece of like, maybe there's sexual trauma there that needs to be processed and brought out. Maybe there is holistic medicine or dietary changes or bringing the inflammation down and going on an inflammatory diet. There's just so much that needs to be done. And I tell you, it is not easy to be a human that is healthy on this planet today. It is challenging and it's expensive and it takes time and it takes devotion. And it's the best thing to spend your time and money on.
It really is. And it's so unfortunate that it has to be so expensive.
Well, hopefully that's going to change.
Yeah.
I hope and I pray. And also, it's all expensive. It's just choose your expensive. Right. But that being said, I kind of want to move away from that and go more into like, what is the glow up?
This is really where it's her opportunity to upgrade her life. And this could be just depending on what it is. Like let's take relationships, since that's what you work with, mostly, right? So in relationships, let's say, she's had a series of bad relationships and she's just had another one that just didn't work out and it kind of blew up. And, it's her opportunity to take a look at, or what are her standards? What are her boundaries? Her emotional boundaries. Does she feel safe? Does she feel seen? Does she feel heard? And it's kind of taking stock of some of that and setting that up for herself and making those changes and making different decisions, when she's out there dating.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because I was talking about this vaguely earlier, is like you and I both have some sort of like interesting throat speaking our truth stuff that we're working through in our own ways.
Right.
And that is something that, as women, we've been told to be quiet and to be good and to behave and to be small, and to all the shame that is put on sexuality, on our bodies. Like, don't be too slutty. Don't wear that. To be a good girl, but, don't tease, but don't be too hard. All the things we're told that we're supposed to be, that really has suppressed our voice. And suppressed our nose.
When you do speak or use your voice, you're not treated with respect.
And
you're shut down.
Yeah. And something that I've learned in my experience with this, because this has been a huge initiation for me in all the things that I do and the work that I do, being on the radio and interactions with men that I've had in my life, is, in those moments, it's a realignment, and to not feed them and give them so much energy, just be like, cut them out of your life. Nope. Next, please. Like, we don't need to give the energy that's draining us so much attention and devotion and care, because that's something we have been taught as women too, like to micromanage the emotions of others and to take care of everything all the time. And something that I'm really learning in my life right now is, it's not my job to be angry at the world for how it is and it's not working. It's my job to say no to what's not working for me, and to just not even feed it energy, and just no next. And that, when I do that, then we're not feeding and giving energy to what's not working. It's more about creating what is in alignment for us and what's a total holy yes, and which will help us activate and be alive in our hearts. And what is our heart song, right? This is what this show is all about, is following your heart song. What's your alive? And I love that from, that you're talking about the glow up, is like, what is that for you? If you're listening right now, what is that next glow up in your life?
It's great that, and you're, young, and that you're in your mid 30s and you're having that realization and setting those standards and boundaries for yourself. But for some women, it takes them a lot longer to learn that, or to give themselves permission to love themselves and be important to themselves, and, feed that energy back to themselves, figure out what their interests are, putting the energy into themselves, developing their career further, or developing their spirituality practice instead of, or really taking care of herself within her personal relationships. and looking at what's toxic, what's supportive, and choosing what's supportive, and maybe taking a look at like, why did I, what did I learn from those relationships that didn't work out? And if they were toxic, why was I in them? Can I make different choices? And am I going to feel comfortable in my own skin doing that?
I think
And then you're getting into, now see, this goes into, to me, goes in, and this is why I love the subconscious mind, is the subconscious programming, because a lot of it is looking back at a woman, or anyone's patterns. And you can see, like, what's the pattern that she's been in?
Well,
and that's where we start to make those changes. And it's uncomfortable because the subconscious part of you wants to fight to keep you in that pattern because it's known. And there's always the fear of the unknown. And it's like the unknown is not safe. And, all these lies that we tell ourselves.
100%. And I also think what is that there's also a pattern happening collectively right now. And like, no matter if you're like what age you are as a woman, there is a transition happening, and I'm seeing it. And
Definitely.
the main thing is if you're in your 60s, you have a lot more unprogramming to do than if you're in your 20s, of years of being told you're to be small and to not to be too much and not to be too sexual. There's more to unpack and unravel.
Oh, as you get older? Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, because there's more
if you're
time.
in your 20s and you're conscious enough to start doing that work, then more power to you. You're ahead of the game. But I think most of us don't really realize that until later. And it's like, oh, we have so much to do.
But that's what I'm saying is right now in 2025, there's a collective transmission shift happening collectively in the world. And I think a lot of it has to do with what we're talking into right now. There's podcasts and radio shows and YouTube things and TikTok and Instagram. Like, we are programming ourselves with all this information that we're bringing in. And it's so much more normalized to talk about these things than it was when you were 20. So like, there's so much more empowerment available right now than there was. And so, yes, it's harder for a 60-year-old than it is for a 20-year-old to reprogram. That's so much more challenging because there's so much more years of programming to undo. But I think, one of the things I'm seeing with the younger generations, with men and women, and I'm seeing it's incredible, is A, they learn really fast, which I'm super grateful for, and B, they're learning. And the world is shifting right now.
Right. I mean, I also don't want anyone who's in their 50s or 60s to feel discouraged.
Yeah.
To feel like, oh, well, I have to give up. Like, it's just too much. And it's like, no, it is and it isn't. And you can successfully reprogram yourself or reprogram your patterns. So, I certainly wouldn't want somebody to feel like I wouldn't want somebody to give up or not try.
No. I'm sorry if I came across that way in any way. That wasn't my intention. I guess what my goal of trying to say is there's a collective awakening happening consciously.
Right.
I know no matter what age you are, I think you're feeling it in one way or another. There's like this like little pull to be more and to speak more and to have more confidence and to get curious about what stuff.
Well, and also that I think what I see too is that there's this rise in coaches and people wanting to share their experiences and help other people rise and awaken.
It's huge. It's cool.
Yeah. And I think that's just going to continue, that it's becoming very common for people to hire a coach. Coaches have coaches. I mean, I have a coach.
I have a coach.
Everybody has it. I mean, who doesn't have a coach?
I have like 4 coaches.
Yeah. Yeah, you need it. It's really helpful. And it's because all this stuff is happening so fast. So people need the support.
Yeah, no, 100%. And I'm really excited about what's happening right now. I think a lot of the world is really focusing on the negative of what's not working and what's wrong and what's bad. And I really think that when we do that, we put our energy into that and it drains us. And that's one of the toxic patterns that we've been living in. And the most radical, powerful, awakened thing you can do is take care of yourself and to love yourself and to practice it. Because it doesn't happen like, you don't just wake up and be like, today I love myself. And that is what it is.
Oh, and for some people, it takes years to be able to really love themselves. And that's okay. I mean, it depends on what that person's past is and what their programming is and, what their experience
it's lifetimes.
Yeah.
It's a practice. It's not like a thing you just happen to do one day. It's a daily
It's a commitment
committed
to do it.
practice. How can I give myself love today? How can I support myself today? What is the most loving thing I can do right now for myself? And that, I think, is a radical conversation as a woman to put herself first and her self-love first. And it's a beautiful thing. And that's what I feel like. Maybe, you have a different perspective, but like, that's kind of what the glow up is like, what is it in your life that gets to upgrade right now?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think for me, developing this standards and boundaries, especially with personal relationships, that to me is self-love.
Mm.
I'm not necessarily putting up walls. It's just that I know what I want. I know how I want to be treated. And if that's not happening, I'm going to move away from that. And that person just is going to be on the outer circle of my life.
Yeah, no, 100%. One of the things I have made a commitment with myself lately is that I don't get to be my partner's coach or therapist. That they get to get a coach and a therapist, and that I get to let them process on their own. Because I think a lot of times we take on a lot of the emotional responsibility of others. It's like a very nurturing thing
as
to
a
do.
coach?
As a woman.
Oh, yeah. As a woman. Yeah.
Yeah.
But if you're also a female coach, it's probably doubly so.
Yeah.
And I would definitely not recommend coaching your partner by
No.
any means.
I used to.
I've had that experience and that is definitely not a good path to go down.
Yeah, so for sure. Unfortunately, time went really fast.
Yeah, it did.
So we only have a few minutes left. But is there anything that you would love to leave people with, or any last words that you think get out?
I think the one thing that I did want to mention is that I do think it's really important for women to get a GI map done, to get their gut checked to see where they are, because that definitely can also feed into the symptoms. And think about it. If you're in your 40s and 50s, you've probably been eating a certain way and you're eating the American diet and all this stuff. And it's like, you're not really going to escape that. That's going to impact your gut. And the gut is definitely the brain of the body. So I would recommend also getting a GI map done as well.
How does one do that? Is like
you can go to a possibly like a functional or integrative doctor who specializes in GI, or a GI practitioner, naturopath.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's amazing. I should do that just to be ahead of, I have a really good digestive
really
system,
good.
And I feel really good.
I did. And I'm so happy I did it, because it's really answered a lot of questions. And
That's really amazing. I would love to do that. So if people are interested in learning a little bit more about you and the work that you do, I know you have a quiz.
I do, for women, to find out where they are in their midlife, like what their archetype is. So it's the archetype quiz, and you can find it on my website at darasloan.com. And there's a banner at the top. It's a very brief quiz. Go ahead and take it. And it's just fun to know what your archetype is.
So it's Dara Sloan, DARASLOAN.
Yes.
.com.
Yes.
And then you have Instagram as well, and TikTok, right?
I do.
You're on TikTok.
I am. So Instagram is Dara.Sloan, and then TikTok is Dara_Sloan.
Okay. Amazing. I'm excited to see you share more and be out there and helping women with this topic, because I will say that, I get to, as the coach that I am, get to learn and study more about this, because a lot of my clients that are coming to me in their 50s and 60s having challenges with their sex life. And this is a piece of it.
Absolutely.
As you said, it's not everything, but it's definitely a piece, and it does impact you. So I really appreciate you being on the show, coming all the way down from Los Angeles to be here in the studio.
No, it was great to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, and definitely check out her quiz and let me know how it goes if you want. You can check me out at roseheartsong.com.